Hello and welcome back to All You Can Board. Feels good to be back. It's been quite a while. It's been almost a year now since I've done any filming or appeared on the channel in any way. And for those who followed our channel for a while, you've probably noticed it's been really quiet for a while. I think we've had about 3 videos in the past, 9 or 10 months or so. That was never the intention. I'm going to cover this a little bit. There's going to be a bit of a minor update about the channel at the beginning of this video, and then we're going to cover a few other topics before getting into the actual games that are leaving my collection. So if you want to just skip ahead to the games, you don't care about anything else, use the timestamps below. Use that for any part of the video, of course. Lots to cover here, lots of games I'm getting rid of, 12 games leaving my collection. I meant to do a lot more of these videos by now. Life's just been crazy. We did a recent update video that's kind of just an unlisted YouTube video, just for those who really want to see something that doesn't really belong on the main channel. But if you want to see that, you can go to our Discord server, go to the announcements section, and you can find the link there. And you'll get a little bit more info about where we've been or what's going on, what you can expect going forward. And we'll also have an updated kind of video where myself, Dylan, and Braden will give you guys all some type of update about the channel and a little more in depth at some point, either later this month, or if not, then January at the very latest. But I can assure you that similar to, last year I did a similar thing where I had a curating my collection video after we had had a long absence, and I said we were kind of back, and I know that we were for a while. We had quite a few videos over the course of a few months, and then we kind of petered off again there. For those of you who might remember, my wife and I, we had our second child in January, so she's about 10 months old now, and we also have a 3-year-old, so I've just been swamped. I knew there was going to be a few months there where I wouldn't be able to appear on the channel, and I thought it was just going to be a few months. It's been a lot longer, obviously. So life's just been hectic. It's been tough for the 3 of us to find time to get together to film, let alone to play games. So anyway, I won't get too much more into that again because I went into it a little bit more on the update video. But in terms of what you can expect going forward, my next video after this will be a review of Planet Unknown. So that'll just be a standalone review on just that game, pretty in-depth. And then beyond that, got some Patreon content coming. We've got things like my Unplayed games from my collection, which I filmed and actually is already up and available. And that one I might even make available to former patrons who canceled their subscription, and for good reason. I don't blame you for doing that, as I mentioned in the update video. So that's going to be a bit of a tie-in to this video, since I often talk about my total games that I have, which games have left, how many unplayed games I have on my shelf, all that kind of stuff. So what else here? So yeah, you know what, let's catch up on that. I think last time I did one of these videos, back in, I think it was November last year, I think my collection was down to 172 total games, and I think I had 48 of them unplayed. Don't quote me on the numbers as well, because I've gone over my collection. I think I might have missed a game or two here or there, or maybe doubled up on a game, so I don't know if the numbers add up exactly, but that's kind of where I was at. And if you remember in those videos, I think I'd said my sort of realistic goal was to get my collection down to minimum 150. Ideally, I was trying to get it down to 120 or less. Of course, since I hadn't had time to do those videos, we had a major renovation down here in our basement, which has now led to a proper game room / office. So this studio that you're seeing now is technically the first time I'm filming in here, because I actually have walls around me with a door, whereas before I was just filming in one giant room where my cat could come and mess around with all the pieces I had on the game table, and my son could walk around and knock over equipment and stuff. So it's a bit more limited. Now I have a bit more of my own space here, and I think this is going to really help, especially with, again, having 2 young children and whatnot. So let's talk about, I suppose, okay, well, right now my collection has gone up to 196 games. Again, if I have 12 games here ready to go. I've got another probably 15 or 20 on my probably culling shelf. I have other games behind me. I won't mention which ones that I have a feeling will probably leave soon, or I already know they're going to leave, maybe after I review them or whatnot. So there's going to be lots of movement, but as I got dangerously close to 200 here, and you guys might remember, I did a 2023 no buying games for a year, and I was successful in that. I didn't buy a single game in the calendar year of 2023, but so far in 2024, I bought quite a few. I've acquired 24 new games. They haven't all been brand new. Some of them have been used. Some of them have been I've received as gifts or whatnot, but so I'm going to go over right now the list of games that I've acquired in 2024. Which are, in no particular order, Revive, Dorf Romantic, Zuvaris, Winter Court, Fast Sloths, The Princes of Florence, Medici, Lancaster, Nar, The Morrison Game Factory, Dominant Species, Let's Go to Japan, Orongo, Nekojima, Forest Shuffle, Mists Over Carcassonne, Bus, Photograph, Circus Flocati, Lords of Vegas, Trio, Big Shot, Capital Lux 2, and I also received Empire's End as a gift. I also have a lead on a used copy of Clans, which hasn't officially entered my collection yet, so that would be 197, but I haven't actually officially picked it up yet, so we'll call it 196 for now. After I get rid of these 12 at the end of this video, I'll be down to 184, and yeah, I'm going to probably cool it on the buying for a little bit as I keep culling and culling, but that's basically it. Now let's talk about, so when I last did this video, I want to start informing you guys and continue like I did in the last video about the games that I've got off of my unplayed games shelf. I'm not a huge fan of the term shelf of shame. I'm not ashamed to have those games. Well, some of them. Some of the ones that have been there for long, there's some shame. But a lot of them I get knowing that they might not be played for a couple of years. But if I think like, hey, it's limited opportunity, this game's going to go out of print, or I've never seen this available before and I've seen online a used copy or whatever, I'm thinking long term. If it's a game I know I want in my collection, I want to try one day, it's okay if it doesn't get played right away. So anyway, the games, let's see here. So the last game I had mentioned as getting off of my unplayed shelf last time was Fresh Fish, and that I played in, I think, September of 2023. So I played 6 more games from my collection that were unplayed before the end of 2023. They were the Transcontinental, Longshot the Dice Game, Paint the Roses, The King is Dead, Scout, and Scapegoat. So many of those we spoke about on the channel in subsequent videos, whether that was in my 2-part 2022 tier list videos, which included my top 10 of that year, which, by the way, I will be doing a similar thing for the year 2023. No, this isn't an error. I'm not talking 2024. I need a lot more time to cover play and whatever those 2024 releases. So that video is a long way away, but I will be doing absolutely a similar 2-part 2023 tier list video. It's going to be a bit later this year, though. I don't think I'll be able to get it done this month. It'll probably be January or February, so you can look forward to that, but please do be patient. But yeah, some of those games were already covered there, but so I ended up playing 28 of my unplayed games in the calendar year of 2023, which I thought was pretty decent. Again, ended up nowhere near my goals, but I thought I was going to have a lot more time on my hands, so I guess wishful thinking. In 2024 so far, I have played 16 of my unplayed games, which are, and some of these have been amazing games. A lot of these, I mean, pretty much all of them I think will be spoken about on the channel at some point. So we've got Through the Desert, Barony, Oranienburger Canal, El Grande, Findorf, Taj Mahal, Crisis, Glenmore 2 Chronicles, Dorf Romantic the board game, Villagers, Empire's End, Fast Sloths, Nekojima, Revive, Mists Over Carcassonne, and Winter Court. And even in the games I mentioned that I acquired, some of those I'd already played either online or someone else's physical copy or whatnot, so it's not to say that all those games are on the unplayed shelf. So I think that's pretty much it that I wanted to talk about at the start here. I think, oh no, one more thing. So this is part of this series or something that I want to incorporate into this series going forward, starting with the next Curating My Collection video. I just didn't want to delay this anymore. You know, again, our channel has been without content without any videos for quite some time already, but we have a shared, at least Dylan and I, Braden has his own Board Game Geek account, Dylan and I have a shared account for AYCB that we've used in the past, but we don't really track our collections or rating games or anything like that accurately. Anything on there is very outdated and would have been kind of both of our collections mixed together. I'm going to be making my own Board Game Geek account, and eventually, like at some point in the next month or two, I'm going to be keeping my collection current up there. I'm going to be putting the games I've owned, my previously owned. I'm going to eventually get through rating all the games I've played, etc., etc. So once I have that in the next video, I'll drop my BGG username in the comments below, or I'll put it on screen somewhere, or in the comments below, I mean in the description. And for anyone who wants to be able, look at that to follow along or see which games I've culled in the past, I will be able to do that. And we can just be BGG friends, right? So anyway, let's get into the games that are leaving my collection. You know what? Let's just get right into it. I think, so technically, before this video, I would have had 47 games from my unplayed shelf. And you might remember that I mentioned before that I didn't ever want to get rid of a game without having played it. But I've kind of rethought that a little bit and decided that that's sort of a sunk cost fallacy, and I don't need to. My argument at the time was, hey, I should honor my past self, that like if at some point, whether it was 1 year ago, 6 months ago, 8 years ago, whatever, if at some point I was interested in a game, even if I'm not particularly interested in it right now, I should give it a chance to kind of, appease my past Carlo, I guess you could say. And the more I thought about it, it feels like I'm restricting myself and forcing myself to play something just because I have it or just because I spent the money on it. And that kind of goes against how I feel about board games, and especially with having less time now, with having two very young kids, it just doesn't feel right. I have games. So what I decided to do was to get rid of the bottom 3. So out of my 47 unplayed games that I had, I decided to get rid of the 3 that I was least interested in playing. So after this, I'll be down to 44 unplayed games. So let's talk about those 3 right now. The first one is Admirals. This is an old, I don't even remember when this is from. It's like the 50s, I think, or 70s. This, I don't know a whole lot about it. It is basically sort of a Stratego style game out at sea. I got this a few years ago. I believe it was from a friend's grandma's estate sale. And I just never got around to playing it. And now that I have and have played Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation, everything I've read about this on BGG, like, it sounds decent, but I just don't see any reason to, like, keep it around for however long. There's too many games I want to try ahead of it, so I'm moving on from that one. It's an old Parker publication. And these 3 I don't have any B-roll shots for because, I didn't end up playing them. Next up is Rossio. This might be the one I feel potentially the most guilty about of these 3 that I'm talking about here, because this is so Rossio is a district of Lisbon in Portugal. Lisbon is probably my favorite city in the world. And so this is designed by Portuguese folks, published in Portugal by a Portuguese company, and that was the main reason I bought the game. But every time I've read the rules, I've watched videos about the game, I even set it up to try and play solo once, and it's sort of a tile-laying game. It's kind of like an Azul style game, but it just seemed, again, it was one of those ones that I mentioned it to a couple people. I thought I would maybe end up playing this with my wife. We haven't had a lot of time to play games together. It's just not getting to the table, and after reading the rules and learning more about it, I just feel like I'm not all that excited. I'm quite confident that I might play it once or twice and be like, oh, that was pretty cool. But why do I need to hang on to it and force myself? I've already had this game for probably 4 years and never played it, so let's just move on from Rossio. Again, I feel bad, and if you haven't been to Lisbon, please go. It's a beautiful place. Portugal in general is, but... And the last one here that never got played off my shelf, this one I feel pretty bad about too. This is called Godz. So some of you might remember this was a game that went up on Kickstarter in 2020. I think it was pretty early in the pandemic. And I got this specifically knowing it wasn't going to necessarily be my style of game in terms of, rule set, and that a lot of people in my game group I knew would have no interest in playing this. I got this specifically with a couple of my friends in mind who I don't play games with a lot, but who are big, I'm gonna say hip hop instead of rap fans, because, anyways, I won't get into the differences between the two, but a couple of my friends and I have always, or for a long time now, been into, certain hip-hop artists, but mostly underground kind of indie stuff. I'm going to drop a list actually on screen. I'll read out some names in a bit, but this is basically a game where you you play as a rapper, and you have to, basically you're releasing albums, and there's all kinds of stuff you can do with trash-talking other rappers, and I forget the rules now. I've read the rules a couple times. I've suggested playing it a couple times. It's just sat here, and I keep thinking like, oh, I feel bad getting rid of this game. It's a fairly small company. They haven't done a ton of games. I love the artwork. I really appreciate all the unique artwork and the kind of the tribute that this does to rap/hip hop. Not just the music, but kind of the culture, I think is really strong. And I'm glad that a game like this exists in the space. And I think this is going to resonate for a lot of people. This is one that I'd be happy to play. If someone else wanted to, show me the copy or teach me their copy or whatnot. But again, it's been years and it's not getting played, and I'm finding it hard to be the one to advocate for playing it because, again, the friends who I mentioned who are into that sort of thing, into hip-hop music, don't really play a ton of board games, and it hasn't got to the table. It's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So that is Godz. I'll be moving on from it. The component quality looks amazing. The game, from all accounts, got pretty good reviews, and might be up someone's alley. I'm just gonna just if you want to get right on to the next game, just skip ahead, use the timestamp below, because there's just going to be a quick little 30 or 45 second interlude here, because I have to say, this is something we never really get into, like stuff like this a whole lot on the channel, but for those of you who might not know, yeah, I've been a big sort of underground indie hip-hop fan for a long time. These days I mostly listen to instrumental music, and if you want to know more, we can join the Discord, go to our music channel in our Discord server there, and we can talk music a lot more. But I'm just going to rattle off some names real quick, okay? Check out these artists if you haven't heard of any of them, and if you're into underground hip-hop or that kind of stuff. Atmosphere, that's Slug and Ant. Cunning Linguists, Shad, Pete Rock and CL Smooth, Masta Ace, Merce, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Canto I, The Roots, Blue Scholars, J Live, Y Society, Decca, Hieroglyphics, Time Machine, People Under the Stairs, Blue, MF Doom, particularly his stuff with Mad Villain, A Tribe Called Quest, Collective Efforts, Sign, Gift of Gab, and Sweatshop Union. And sorry, when I said MF Doom with Mad Villain, it's with Madlib. Together they are Mad Villain. Anyways, let's move on. So these are the games that I've actually played that are leaving my collection. I'm going to be starting with a chunk of games here that were all covered in my 2022 tier list video. So these are all the games that were in that video that I've already decided to get rid of since playing them and covering them. So, and I tend to do in these videos, for those who might not remember, the games that are easy, starting with the easiest culls all the way leading up to the toughest cull, or like the games I like most. It's not an exact science, but that's kind of generally what we're going for here. It's kind of like when you watch a wrestling or UFC pay-per-view and they save the main event for the end, right? I don't watch wrestling or UFC. I used to. So first we've got the Transcontinental. This is a game that was designed, illustrated, published, Kickstarter campaign was run, etc., all by the same guy named Glenn Dresser. This is a game about the Transcontinental Railway and the development of that in Canada. This is a game I wanted to love a lot because it deals with Canadian history in a way that I haven't really seen many other games do. The level of attention to detail to historical figures who are involved in the sort of construction and use of this railway is stunning. This game was clearly a labor of love by Glenn Dresser, and there's a separate book that comes in there that is just like an educational piece that has photos and descriptions of all the characters' backstory. Like, this game is just steeped in history and in theme. And there's a lot of cool stuff in this game. I won't go too in-depth in it. Again, you can go back and watch that 2022 tier list video if you want to see maybe more thoughts about any of these games that I might not cover here. This had so many cool ideas, but this severely needed a bit more development work and streamlining, and that's what prevented me from wanting to hold on to it. It took me quite a while to even learn the proper rules. I kept having to check the rulebook as I was playing it. And I had to relearn the rules, and I just felt like if I don't get this to the table right away, it's going to be impossible to remember and teach someone else. I really worried about the downtime too. Like, even playing it solo took quite a while, but the idea is that the railways, or the train is going back and forth east and west across Canada, and you have different goods that can be loaded up inside the train, and the goods can be loaded in a certain order so that they can come off the train in a certain order. As you move, you're sort of building and extending the railhead so that when you get to the end, you come back, but as it keeps extending, you can go further down the railhead, and when it gets to a certain point, it triggers the end of the game. You're putting out telegraphs on the map before you take your action, so it's worker placement, but you're putting telegraphs on spaces, and then as the train moves along, it makes those stops, and you can basically leave your telegraph somewhere, and you can actually pass by it on the way one way and then kind of take the action on the way back. I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of cool stuff in this game. I really wanted to love this, and I feel bad for Glenn Dresser because this was released during the pandemic. He did all of this by himself. I know there were some production issues. I know things got crazy with shipping costs and all that, and I know some people were kind of jumping all over his back online saying like, oh, he's disappeared, he took our money. I think it's wrong to assume malicious intent or that someone is just trying to take someone's money. We've talked about mental health and struggles and stuff like that on the channel before, and that's something that's really important to us. And just anyone who might have backed this, or who might kind of, whether it's for this game or some other game that might be in a similar thing, I think Dylan has said it really well in the past of like, you never know what someone else is going through, so never assume the worst, never assume that someone's trying to rip you off and steal your money. He was very responsive during the campaign. He seems like a stand-up guy. He put a lot of time and effort into this. He did videos teaching people how to play, did playthroughs, etc. And I don't know, maybe he just got overwhelmed. It was a lot. But if he designs anything or publishes anything ever again, I will absolutely be at least curious to check it out, because it's clear he has some design chops and he, clearly poured his heart into this game. I just wish it had a little more development work, because there's so many good ideas and I wanted to love it, but I can't justify keeping it around. All right, next up, the Siege of Rundar. So it's not often that I get rid of Reiner Knizia games from my collection, and this is another one that I kind of wanted to like a lot more than I ended up liking it. It's pretty good still, but it's a cooperative deck building game, and it's similar to a lot of cooperative games. You're kind of putting out fires, like something's like if you think of Pandemic, you got to manage all these disease cubes spreading. You think of Ghost Stories, you're standing in the middle of this little map and there's ghosts coming at you from all angles. This is kind of like Ghost Stories style. So the idea is you are playing as dwarves defending the castle. I think it's called the Castle of Rundar, and it's the Siege of Rundar. So there's going to be goblins and orcs and whatever, basically trying to climb the walls, scale the walls, and come after you. And you're standing in the middle of this little kind of courtyard or whatever on top of the castle, and you're guarding these golden nuggets. And so based on the difficulty you choose at the start of the game, ranging from easy to very hard or whatever, you put a certain number of gold nuggets in there, and as these enemies are coming over the walls at you and whatever and launching catapults, they're trying to come steal your gold. And then you have to dig a hole to actually basically get out, to tunnel out with your gold. So if all of your gold runs out or whatever, there's a couple different ways you can win or lose, I think, but I played this once or twice with Dylan as a 2-player game around when we first got it, or when I first got it, and it was really, really tough. We lost in pretty brutal fashion. I took a break from it for a while, and then a few months back I came back to it solo. I played it 2 or 3 times and figured out kind of what I was doing wrong, and on that last play I won pretty comfortably on a fairly high difficulty. So even though it was really, really tough, I eventually overcame it. And usually with co-op games like this, if the game isn't, like, the game has to have a really, really, really... It has to meet a really high bar for me in terms of co-op games. I'm not particularly big on co-op games. I'm usually not the one to suggest playing them. So if I'm going to keep one around, it has to be one that I really, really like and think I'm going to replay a lot. And the main reason I'm not going to be replaying this one is because the cards that you use to build your deck, I didn't find them particularly interesting. There's not a whole lot of variety of different abilities that you're doing. It's mostly just different stats, and you're seeing the similar abilities across most of the items. They just kind of get stronger, and there's a couple different types of attacks that you can do and that kind of thing. But the last thing I'll say about it, and the most impressive thing about this game, is the fact that it plays basically inside the box. Like, you take off the lid, and that you're playing inside the insert of the game, and the sense of kind of like, it's like a dynamic sort of actual space where you feel like you're moving your characters around and having to consider where enemies are coming from which sides of these walls, and the way the rules work with moving around and trying to get in proper position, and do I go here to try and shoot my arrows at these other 2 enemies, or do I go grab these resources so that I can go to this other spot to forge items? So you're kind of, that you have to forge items, like gather resources and use them to get the cards that go into your deck. So you're spending time deciding, am I strengthening my deck, or am I kind of putting out fires by, defeating the enemies that are coming at me from all sides? So it's a really, really impressive design. I just wish there was a little bit more replay value, maybe. I have no desire to come back to it, and I think it'll get some more enjoyment elsewhere. But I think Knizia did a lot better than I would have expected from this type of game. But yeah, anyway, that's Siege of Rundar. I think I've said enough. All right, I don't know where I'm going to put these games, not that much room here. So next up is Catherine, the Cities of the Tsarina. So this one is a, what's the right way to put it? I don't want to say it's a tough game to talk about, but it kind of is. There's 1 or 2 things I like about this game, and a lot of things I don't like about the game. Let's start with what I like. The basic idea is you have 3 cards that start in front of you in your little tableau in what is called your action row. So you're basically going to have 2 rows of cards. You're going to have a top row, which is your action row, and you're going to have a bottom row, which is your activation row. And so you're going to have 3 in the top row and none at the bottom at first. And then over the course of each round, you're going to end up playing 4 cards in each row. So you're going to end up having 7 and 4 at the end. So, but when you play 2 cards at a time, you're going to put 1 in your action row and 1 in the activation row. Anything you play in the activation row, all that matters on that card is the color. You ignore all the abilities. And in the action row, all that matters is the ability. I mean, sort of the color. So you're putting a card on underneath, and as long as the card that you place in the activation row matches the color of the card above it, then you trigger the ability of that card above. And if you activate the ability itself, then there's usually going to be an optional bonus ability that you can also activate. So you're trying to decide, let's say you have, two yellow cards in your hand, and you have one that has a really good ability, but you also have a card on the board that's yellow that already has a good ability. It's in your action row. Do you want to use this yellow card in your hand to play it underneath that yellow card to trigger the one that was already on the board, meaning that you get to activate that card in your action row, but this one that you played, you're not going to get any of those abilities. You're using it to activate other abilities. Or do you want to hang on to this card or place it in your action row, hoping that you'll get another yellow card to place underneath it to activate that one? And at the end of the round, you're getting rid of most of your cards, but keeping some of them out. And yeah, anyway, that's the thing I like about it. Now let's talk about what I don't like. If it's not obvious already, the theme, that's the biggest problem, I think. The theme, the setting, just, if you don't know who Catherine the Great was, which I think that's an awful name, probably more like Catherine the Terrible, but just go look her up online. You can see she was a powerful Russian ruler a long time ago who's mainly remembered for sort of expanding Russian borders into other countries and that sort of thing. I'm sure this sounds familiar, and that is the biggest reason why I think this game has no place, especially currently, but I mean, this isn't something particularly new. This game came out again in 2022, I believe, and I mean, when you look at the map, there's literally a spot that says, I believe it says like Novorossiya, which is basically New Russia, right up against the borders of Ukraine. It's basically encroaching on territory, and this whole game is about, yeah. Again, I'll say right now, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to history, and especially something like this that isn't particularly close to me. But when I've read about people online who have talked about this game, and I sort of started to dig into it and try to educate myself on it, I started realizing a bit more. Obviously when you just look at the map and you see what's going on, it's pretty obvious, but the more you dig in and you talk to people who know more about this history, I start to see a little bit more, and I don't understand why this theme was chosen, because it's not even interesting. I don't understand the purpose of this. This could have been anything. You could have chosen any map, you could have chosen any place in the world. But I want to say this. I don't want to assume there was any ill intent. I've never played any games by this designer before, Johannes Schmidauer-Koenig. Pardon me if I mispronounced that. Never played any games by this designer, but I've never heard of any prior issues. And I've played a lot of games by Capstone. They have a pretty good reputation in the board game industry. I've never really heard any major issues in terms of this kind of stuff. So again, I'd like to give them both the benefit of the doubt that this was either, an oversight, or maybe this game was in development for long. I don't know. I don't want to try to make excuses for them either. I'm just saying I don't bring these issues up to say we should, cancel Capstone Games and stop buying their games and harass the designer on that. I'm not, couldn't be further from the truth, but I just don't want people going out and seeing this game and going and spending money on it and then realizing after what's going on. So, what else can I even say about this game? This is one of those ones where I don't know if I'm actually going to sell this. I don't know if I feel comfortable basically trying to get someone else's money to recoup, the money I spent on it. I would rather, I briefly considered, should I just burn this game, use it for kindling for a bonfire next, spring, summer, fall, whatever. And that kind of also seems silly and maybe wasteful. So I don't know, maybe I'll give it to someone I know who has an idea for it, a teacher who can maybe use this as an example. I guess my brother-in-law is a teacher, and he does have a kind of a board game unit in his class. Maybe he can just put this out in front of the kids and see, and he teaches high school, and maybe you can just see, have them pick it apart and see what the issues are. Maybe we'll retheme it. I'm reminded of Kellen from Board Game Barrage, who is a big fan of rethemes, and he always talks about doing Pokemon rethemes. Maybe that would work. Pokemon, well, you know what? They've got the basic. So actually, the colors on this this might actually work. The colors on these cards are green, blue, and yellow are the three main colors, and grass, water, and fire. Orange instead of, no, I think it's yellow. No, yellow is electricity, I guess. But those are the basic types in Pokemon. You could, and what's the city or world in I mean, there's a couple different places, but you could probably just have like the area majority player, the place where you plop down your little houses could be maybe the gyms where you've defeated leaders. Like, I'm telling you, Pokemon Retheme seems like the way to go with this. So yeah, I don't know. I wish you could just lift that card mechanism right out of the game and just scrap the rest of it. Games like this, just, again, there's so many different themes that could have been chosen. There's so many different directions you could have gone with this game. The theme is, yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. But one more massive complaint I have about the game is that there is so much empty box space inside this that it fits the next game I'm going to talk about right inside. Look how shameful this is. Paint the Roses, the next game I'm getting rid of. Look how much empty space this is. You have a board, a rule book, a deck of cards, and some tokens. This thing could have fit in such a tiny box, and yet this thing is the size of Agricola right here, which is shameful. So I feel like as a product, this thing failed in every single way, from theme, box size, price, presentation. The only thing it got right really was the card system, in my opinion. And one last thing actually about this is, if you're someone on the channel who sees this and you think that you want to come into the YouTube comments and disagree with me, or, you know, pull that nonsense about, oh, it's just a game, man, leave politics out of games, or people are too sensitive, get out of here. Seriously, I'm not going to be gaslit into justifying my position to some random internet stranger who has a backwards way of thinking. If you truly think there's nothing wrong with this, I don't want to assume there's any malicious intent or that you're a bad person. I'm not saying that. You might just be uninformed or whatnot, but I won't even entertain, having a discussion about this, because, you know what, I've said enough. If you're going to disagree, stay out of my YouTube comments and stay out of our Discord. I'm happy to discuss differences in opinions on games. We do that all the time. People give me a hard time for how much I love Carcassonne. People say it's a gateway game, whatever. I will happily disagree with anyone who is being respectful about a topic that is worth having a discussion on. But to me, if you're going to disagree about whether that theme is appropriate or whether something like this has any place in board games, don't even bother. You will just be removed from the YouTube channel or the Discord. Anyway, let's move on. Let's set that aside. Let's talk about Paint the Roses, which is a great game, and one that reminds me of when we covered Curious Cargo on the channel, because Curious Cargo was a game that I respected the design quite a bit. I thought it was really well designed, but it just kind of broke my brain, and I realized after playing it a couple times that it wasn't a game for me. And I'm kind of in the same spot with Paint the Roses. I do like Paint the Roses quite a bit more than Curious Cargo, but it's basically a cooperative deduction game. It sort of feels like The Crew a little bit, because you can't communicate verbally. Most of the game you are playing cards to provide hints at, I'm going to do a poor job explaining the game, but basically you're working together to try and evade the queen who is chasing you, the rose. That you have this marker on the board that shows your progress as a team, and you have cards that are either easy, medium, or hard, that you're kind of giving clues for where things are on the board. And see, the game breaks my brain so much that I'm terrible at even explaining how it works, but it basically has a deduction level similar to The Crew, where you're trying to give hints to your teammates to try and figure out where something is. And it just, the reason why I'm getting rid of it is that this not only does it break my brain, but the stakes feel pretty high. Like, the game can take about an hour, and so if one person makes a mistake, it can feel pretty bad letting the rest of the team down. Or if everything's going well and someone else makes a mistake, like, I'm not gonna be mad at them, but it's also it can be frustrating a little bit. And that's why I really, 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 really like a game like The Crew and prefer it, because if you mess up, whatever, you played for 5 minutes, you reset the scenario and go again. This, I found it was a little demoralizing when someone would like make a mistake, 30 or 40 minutes in, and we just go, oh. But I love how you can choose the difficulty of the cards, and the harder goals that you achieve, the further ahead the rows move. So as you feel the queen approaching you, you kind of feel the pressure to go for the harder clues or whatever to get more distance away from the queen. So I will also end by saying, so first off, this is Ben Goldman's, I believe, first game. And I believe there was a deluxe edition that had some expansions and other content. So it could be that maybe with the, variants or expansion content, I might feel differently about it, but it's not getting played. And again, like, as I mentioned about cooperative games before, they've got to be really good or something that I'm really, really enjoying in order for me to want to keep it around in my collection. So it's a great game, but I have no reason to keep it myself. Okay, next up we've got Wormholes. So this is I think the highest rated game from my 2022 tier list video that I'm getting rid of that was in my collection. I think I had this at number like 14 or 15 or something like that for the year out of 60 some games I played. So I think I had this in the B tier, which is like a 7 out of 10, which again by the BGG rankings is sort of like a good game usually willing to play. I mean, that exactly summarizes it, but it's not going to be one that I pull off the shelf. I wanted to like this game a lot more. It's designed by Peter McPherson, who designed Tiny Towns, which is an excellent game. He only has a few designs to his name so far. I can't remember if it's 2 or 3. Oh, right, he also designed Fit to Print, which is also a great game, and that one came out, I believe, in last year. So in this one, you are moving around space in your little spaceship, creating wormholes where you basically enter one side and you pop out of the other side of the wormhole. So you're plopping down one or both ends of the wormhole. You can use your own wormholes, but you can also use other players' wormholes. And when you use theirs, they score points. So every game takes on this different dynamic, and there's different like planets and black holes and different things that appear on the map. So every game takes on this different complexion, but you're basically just picking up passengers and dropping them off. So you have cards in your hand that tell you where these people want to go, and you're using wormholes to efficiently move around the board and drop off passengers, pick up new passengers, figure out where they need to go, etc., etc. The concept of the game was so intriguing. I wanted to love this, and I've had quite a bit of fun with it still. I've played it a few times, ranging from, 2 to 5, I think? 1 to 5. I would never play the solo version. I played it at 2, 3, and 4, I think. I never played it at the 5-player count, and every time I played it, people went like, oh, this is good, this is a cool game, kind of thing. But no one has ever requested to play it again, and for me, the main thing lacking is... So, the way I think of it is, for anyone who's played Tiny Towns, imagine Tiny Towns, but without the monuments. The monument cards are like the individual ability that everyone has that kind of changes, I don't know, it lets people all do something different. This just felt like it was missing a little something. It felt a little too, and I normally talk about games I like being streamlined, rule sets and all that kind of stuff, but I feel like maybe they took too much out, or there was one, not that I'm saying it needed like player powers similar to the monuments, but there was just something missing to make me want to come back and play it again. But this is one, again, I would never turn down a game of this if someone wanted to play, but just don't need to own it anymore. All right, next up we've got the Isle of Cats. So this is a polyomino game that when I first got it, I liked it quite a bit, and I cooled on it a little. The main reason I'm getting rid of this right now, I'll say, is that we have the Isle of Cats Explore and Draw, which is like the roll and write, or I guess flip and write, because you're using cards, version of this game, and I've played it a couple times with my wife and some other people, and we've all kind of agreed that we enjoy the roll and write version, or flip and write, more than this game. That game has its own issues, I'll be honest. That game isn't perfect either, it has its own issues, but if I wanted to play, like the main thing I like from Isle of Cats, and which translates over to the flip and write version, is the aspect of how you actually fill out your boat and the way that your boat scores. Because you have this, most polyomino games have either like a square or a rectangle or some type of just basic shape that you're filling out with these polyominoes. This one has a boat that's kind of a oval, I don't know if you call it an oblong shape. It's, well, you know what a boat looks like, and you're probably seeing B-roll right now anyways. And it's divided into rooms that all are weirdly shaped. And basically, at the end of the game, any room that isn't 100% filled, you could fill all but one space of the room, and you get -5 points for every room of your board that's not filled. And you have to be placing your cats out adjacently to each other. Then you also score points for having adjacent groups of cats. If you have 3 cats of at least 3 of the same color or same family together, then you start getting points from 3 all the way up to, I think, a group of 8. But if you have 2 of the same color together, then they're not worth anything. So you're kind of drafting these cats. I'm sure most of you, or some of you at least, know, most of how the game plays and whatnot. The main 2 things that kind of turned me off of the game over time, that made me, maybe not turned off, but like made me cool on the game and realize that it wasn't quite what I had hoped for. The first is the drafting itself. It just felt like an unnecessary additional step to the game. I felt like this didn't really need drafting. I guess there's three things I'm just realizing. The second thing is the fact that you just kind of get 20 fish at the beginning. Like, everyone just gets 20 fish at the beginning of the round automatically. It's just some weird, like, here's 20 income. There's no... It just felt kind of strange. It's like, why are we all just gaining 20 fish? Thematically, I guess it was a bit odd. Like, I want to earn it, or is there some explanation? Is there anything you do to get more fish or less fish in that round? Like, there was just something about it that felt a bit weird, that it's just this automatic 20 fish. And what was the third thing? The lesson cards. So the lesson cards, there's public lessons and private lessons, which are basically public or private objectives. And again, because you're drafting these, you might get a hand right at the start. You look at it and you might go, oh, none of these goals are anything I'm even close to working on, and I don't even know if I want to take these. Meanwhile, the person next to you might have drawn a goal that's going to give them 12 points at the end of the game, might go, oh, I've already met this condition actually, and they just keep the card and whatever. And I played this quite a few times, and every single time the player that won was the player that achieved the most lesson cards. And it was usually, whether it was me winning or someone else winning, almost every time that person admitted, like, oh yeah, well, I drew that one and I already had it completed, and I drew that one, I already had it completed. So it just felt like such a large share of the points went to something that just came down to total chance. And for a game that takes an hour to an hour and a half, I like when games come down to chance if it's like a filler game, something quick, lighthearted, a party game or whatever. But if it's an hour and a half and you've got all these, you make it feel like a strategy game because you let me draft and get moneyed and plan this boat and I have all these scoring conditions. You make it feel like a strategy game and you let the players strategize, but then it sometimes feels like the decisions you make don't ultimately have enough of an outcome on the result of the game or effect on the outcome of the game. It can be a little bit of a letdown. So over time, I've just lost a bit of my desire to play it. It's also on Board Game Arena if I do want to play it. But yeah, the flip and write version is just quicker and a little more streamlined and efficient. So that's why it's sticking in my collection, and that's why the Isle of Cats will be leaving. And also, I know my sister-in-law is going to definitely take that one off my hands, so I'll probably still be able to play it whenever I want. All right, 3 more games here. I know this video has gotten quite long. That's what happens when you take a break for almost a year. So Era Medieval Age. This is another polyomino, but also going back to the Isle of Cats Explore and Draw. This is another sort of roll and write adjacent game. It's a roll and build. So you have this kind of, and it's designed by Matt Leacock, who designed Pandemic. I think this came out in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2019. But I think this is almost a follow-up to Roll Through the Ages, but you have a little screen to shield your dice. Every player has these various dice of different colors, and you are basically building your own little village or town or whatnot. So you're rolling dice, and then you can do re-rolls behind your screen, depending on what you get. Then you have resources and food. Basically, each of your dice counts as a worker, and in the sort of like feeding phase of each round, every worker needs to be fed 1 food. So you have these kind of pegs on your board that track your food, your influence, your religion status, your I think income, your wood, all that kind of stuff, and you're rolling the dice to produce goods, to fight other people, to have disasters happen where your buildings burn down, or things like that. And not only do you have different buildings that you're building inside here, but you have walls that you can build around the buildings. And so it's a very interactive, for like a polyomino style game where you have your own thing that you're building. This is one of the harshest and most brutal ones I've played, because you can destroy other people's buildings, you can just wreck people's progress a lot. And I wasn't really a fan of how much of that there was. I like really interactive games. Those of you who watch the channel, you know I love just like brutal games where you can, where your opponents make moves that just go like, oh, I can't believe you just did that to me. But I like it more when it's subtle, like you're getting in people's way or preventing them from doing something rather than undoing progress they already have in such a way, especially again when you have your own player board and someone is just rolling dice and then randomly is like, yeah, this die, I had these 3 skulls or whatever, which triggers this disaster, and I'm just going to destroy your stuff. But if you wall anything that's walled in, completely surrounded by walls, is immune to attacks from other players. So but by walls on their own don't really score you any points, and they just take up space and they can wreck other of your scoring conditions. But I love the way that the like actually building things out, and the way that the buildings score. There's, you know, you can build hospitals and churches, and some of these buildings get you extra dice for certain pools, or will score, you know, this building will say you get extra points if you have these other buildings surrounding, or you get extra points if you have no buildings around these points, or if you have this many of these, or whatever. There's a bunch of different scoring conditions. And I think at the end of the game, the player with the largest walled-in area that is completely surrounded by walls gets like a bonus 10 points. So there's a lot of keeping an eye on what people are doing. So you're probably wondering, like, man, that sounds pretty cool. Why are you getting rid of this? Well, I played it a few times, and no one I played it with ever kind of like requested to play it again. It's not something I'm going to play solo. And part of what I don't like as well is just, it's not that I'm suspecting anyone of cheating, because we all make mistakes sometimes we play games. We've all been in that position where you go to make a move and someone goes, wait a second, that doesn't work, or you can't do that because that. And you go, oh, right, I'm so sorry, or whatever. And I've been guilty of it. People in my group have been guilty of it. None of us ever suspect other people of cheating, but when people are rolling dice behind a screen and picking them up and rolling again, and you don't know what's going on, I sometimes wonder, not only like, are you sure you're doing it right? And also, like, I want someone to almost like be watching what I'm doing. Like when I'm playing a game, a lot of the time, I don't want to accidentally make mistakes that are going to get missed, that are going to affect the game state. So that's a small complaint. That's not the main reason I'm getting rid of it, but it's been around. I bought this, I think, 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. I've played it, I think, 3 or 4 times, but it's been a few years now. And yeah, it's a big box. It's heavy, and there are just other polyomino games that I have ahead of it, as well as other like interactive games. Like if I want to play a game where I'm going to be getting upset at the people around the table, or there's going to be trash talk about, you know, going after each other's stuff, there's just way too many games I have ahead of it. But I would gladly play this anytime. I'm kind of hoping someone I know in my like group, friend group, ends up taking this off my hands, because I would play it again someday, but I've already forgotten the rules, and I don't want to be the one responsible for getting this to the table, because again, if I'm hosting a game night, there's like at least 50 games I have ahead of this just in my own collection. All right, 2 more games left. Hadrian's Wall is up next. This one I won't talk about for very long, because we actually covered this in a Own It, Play It, or Skip It on the channel quite a while back. I'll try to remember to link that in the description below. And I will say right now, we've done, I don't know how many games that we've each covered in Own It, Play It, Skip It, but this is the first game that I've said is an Own It that I am actually getting rid of. And so this is probably the heaviest roll and write game I've played. I think Twilight Inscription is probably the heaviest roll and write ever designed. This is probably the second heaviest as far as I know, unless I'm forgetting anything. But so this is one I mentioned when I did the Own It, Play It, or Skip It. This is a game I would only ever really want to play solo. And the main 2 reasons I'm getting rid of it are, 1, it's now on Board Game Arena, and it's really smooth on there. And especially because if you're playing solo, if you need to like stop and take a break and come back to it, it's fine. No one's gonna, you know, boot you out of the game for having to wait for your turn or whatever. And it's all automated. It tells you like where your options are, right? It highlights what you can do. It prevents you from making mistakes. And this is one of those combo-tastic ones where, oh, I color in this spot. Whoa, it triggers this other thing. So I go here. Oh, and that makes, what decision am I going to make? And then maybe you're like, wait, did I take that effect? Or, oh, did I do that properly? And you kind of don't remember. Or maybe you're interrupted because you have 2 really young kids who are asking for something, or baby's crying or whatever. So you come back to it and you go, where was I? Oh, did I use that thing? So it's a game that kind of like requires your full attention for about an hour or so. And I also found that a lot of the tracks are luck based, and I don't mind that, but it's just because of how long it is, a lot of the time by the 2nd or 3rd round, if I'd had enough bad luck, I kind of already knew I was going to get a pretty bad score. And then it kind of just felt a little demoralizing. It's like, I'm just going to play this out even though I've already done poorly. I'm going to get nowhere near like what I wanted to achieve. Do I just scrap it and start over? Or do I just like force myself to play through it and just see it through to the end? And every time I did that, I found that it was just a little bit unsatisfying. I've explored a lot of the different tracks that you can go down and just tried approaching the game differently. And yeah, I've played it a good 10 or 12 times, mostly in person, but I have played it about 2 or 3 times on BGA. And I don't have the pull to go back to it anymore. And the fact that it is on Board Game Arena just makes me think, if I am going to go back and play it sometime, it'll probably be on there. And I believe they announced, I don't remember what it's called now, but I believe they announced a follow-up game to Hadrian's Wall a little while ago. I kind of just remembered that, actually. But yeah, anyways, that's Hadrian's Wall. And again, that is the first game from Own It, Play It, Skip It series that I am getting rid of from my collection. But it's a good one. It's definitely one of the better sort of medium plus heavy roll and write games out there. All right, last one I'm getting rid of here. This way, this side this time. This is Summoner Wars, specifically the 2nd edition Master Set. So this is an excellent game. I just want to say right off the bat, I actually recommended this in our gift guide, I think last year, for people who are like, if you had a dedicated 2-player gaming partner, think of it as sort of chess with asymmetric factions where your units are represented by cards. So you have a deck of cards, you have either, like the goblins, or you have, like the ice trolls, I think, or there's this other faction that's kind of ethereal. They're like spirits or whatnot. And you basically have this unique deck of cards. You have a leader, I think they're called, or a hero. And basically what you're trying to do is defeat the other player's hero. And you never know which cards are going to come out of the deck in which order, right? You shuffle up your deck, you draw a hand of cards, you have these portals that are on the map, and you can spawn units from portals, and you have sort of magic, and you have a health bar and all this kind of stuff, and you're basically moving these cards around, trying to attack other units, get in position, and defeat the other person's leader. If you run through your deck, you don't shuffle it again. As soon as you've gotten through your deck and you have nothing left, you just lose the game. So every game feels like it has a different, it plays out differently and all that kind of stuff. There's one thing I don't like about the game straight up, and then there's one barrier that keeps me from getting it back to the table. So the thing that I don't like is the dice combat. For those of you who watch the channel a lot, you'll know that I'm not a huge fan of dice in games in general. There are a lot of games I like that, Can't Stop is one of them, for example. Castles of Burgundy is a great game, whatever. But I think in a game like this that feels like the stakes are high, it's one-on-one battle, like these types of games where you get into position, you have this big plan, you get into position, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to attack that unit, and then you roll the dice, and it's just like, oh, I guess I missed. It's so unsatisfying, not only as the person, doing the attack, but even when my opponent would do that, I felt, not only did I feel bad, but it just felt unsatisfying. I'm like, hey, that was a great play. Like, you did this, you got into position, and then like you got, it was like a 1 in 12 chance or whatever that you were going to get a terrible roll and not be able to make it. And yeah, so there's a couple things like that. And the main reason why is just that it's leaving my collection is a lot of these cards are just like filled with text, very text heavy. And when you don't know the factions well and your opponent's got, 8 cards on the table and you've got 6 cards on the table, and then you have another handful of 4 cards and you're just reading text and what does that card do again? What does that one do? And your opponent's, okay, I'm going to attack you with this way. What does that do? There's so much to keep track of that I think this is the type of game that you really, really, really need to like dive into it, play it over and over and over with the same person, learn factions, then you start to learn the subtleties. And I feel like this is a game that's kind of an all or nothing. This makes no sense to me to keep around as a casual, I'll play it once in a while kind of game in my collection. So Dylan and I have talked about this as a game that if this had come out if we knew about this game when we were like teenagers, we probably would have played this like hundreds of times and it would have probably been one of our favorite games of all time. But where I'm at in life right now, a game like this doesn't really have a place in my collection. And if I'm going to play a game where I have sort of a 2-player only head-to-head kind of game where I'm like kind of moving around on a map trying to defeat the other person, I've got a few others on my shelf, things like Santorini, Trick Shot, which is like a hockey game, That Time You Killed Me. Those ones are just ahead of it right now because those are easier to just sort of get into for the odd play here and there, whereas again this involves a level of investment. And just to be clear, I played this with, I showed it to at least 3 or 4 different people, including Dylan, and everyone thought it was a well-designed game and was impressive. We all had fun, but no one has requested to play it again, I think because of that barrier of learning all the cards and having to remember them and re-ask your opponent to clarify what that card does again, etc., etc. So Summoner Wars, this is one. Oh, and there's also a digital version online, and that's the other thing, is if I am going to end up ever getting into it, I'll probably just get into the online version. I think it's free with a couple of basic factions, and then you can pay like $2 or $3 here and there to unlock additional factions. So if you're intrigued at all, go at least try it. I think a lot of people are going to love this game, and it's one that I might, who knows, like maybe when my kids have grown up and are potentially into board games, and me and my son or daughter are looking for a 2-player game or something, like, I don't know, maybe I rebuy this in the future or play someone else's copy. But for now, it just doesn't make sense to keep Summoner Wars 2nd Edition Master Set around any longer. So that's it. Those are the 12 games I'm getting rid of. I believe there was something else I wanted to mention before the end. Yeah, I mean, these culls are getting tougher and tougher. Like I said, there's all kinds of games here that I'm looking at on my shelf that I've already set up for the next curating my collection video, or the next couple potentially. And yeah, it gets tougher, but it also gets more rewarding. I think I mentioned this in one of my last curating my collection videos, where I don't think I have any regrets about any game I've gotten rid of yet. There might be one or two that I sometimes wish, maybe I wish I had that around, or it'd be good to play that again. But for the most part, I never really think a whole lot about the games I've gotten rid of. I encourage anyone who is, maybe reluctant to get rid of games, but feels like they should. But what if I hold on to this game, or but what if so and so were to come over one day, or what if when my kid's older, or what if I meet that person at that convention who wants to play it, or there's so many what ifs, there's so many leaving all these possibilities open, wanting to have all these games. And I want to be clear again that I've talked about this before as well. I never want to come across as a gatekeeper or tell people how to engage in the hobby. So if you want to be a collector, and if you want to have games on your shelf that you never play, and you can have them for 20 years and never play them, and you're there for collecting, then good for you. There is nothing wrong with that. You can be a gamer, you can be a collector, you can engage in the hobby however you want, and no one can really tell you you're doing it wrong. Unless you're just being a jerk and being rude to people and being a gatekeeper or whatever. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to ever have people watch this channel and think that I'm trying to tell them not to be a collector. You do you, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. But for me personally, where I'm at, and sort of things that I've struggled with in my life in terms of indecision, or maybe unwillingness to take risks on things because I'm worried about what if I do this or what if I don't do this, and I'm talking about this collection thing. So I wanted to end with a quote here. I don't normally do this sort of thing, but this is a quote from a book, and this quote has been really important to me for a long time. I want to credit Dr. Robert Burns, the greatest educational figure I've ever had, who was a university professor of mine, who made us read a book called The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This quote is one of the most powerful quotes I've ever read. It has always stuck with me, and anytime there's been something in my life where I feel like I'm kind of paralyzed by indecision, or regretting something, or trying to hold on to things like this just in case you get that optimal play, I want to share this quote, and that's how I'm going to end this video. And for anyone who hasn't read the book, I highly recommend you read it as well, but I'm just going to read the quote. "I saw my life branching out before me like the green fig tree in the story. From the tip of every branch, like a fat purple fig, a wonderful future beckoned and winked. One fig was a husband and a happy home and children, and another fig was a famous poet, and another fig was a brilliant professor, and another fig was E.G., the amazing editor, and another fig was Europe and Africa and South America, and another fig was Constantine and Socrates and Attila, and a pack of other lovers with queer names and offbeat professions, and another fig was an Olympic lady crew champion, and beyond and above these figs were many more figs I couldn't quite make out. I saw myself sitting in the crotch of this fig tree, starving to death just because I couldn't make up my mind which of the figs I would choose. I wanted each and every one of them, but choosing one meant losing all the rest. And as I sat there, unable to decide, the figs began to wrinkle and go black, and one by one, they plopped to the ground at my feet." So I'll leave you with that. Think about that in terms of your board game collection, but also more importantly, think about that in terms of your everyday life and just how you approach things. The quote has always meant a lot to me, and I've gone back to it, and I hope it does for you what it has done for me. Thanks for watching.